We are live. Welcome to the stream. Um, Welcome to another episode of From the Archives. This week, you can see my lovely tower of books here. Um, it's going to be a little different at this week's episode compared to last. Actually, I need to. Oh, it's right here. Whoops. I've got next week's episode lined up as well. I have to. We're getting to the point with recording these episodes that I am running out of. Actually, the way I've placed all these books, I literally can't even see all of my information from my one monitor because there's just tower of books here that we're talking about today. But yeah, we're getting to the point in recording these episodes, which I'm happy about. I'm happy about having this issue. We're getting to the point where I have to start lining up books with enough time in advance that I can read them if I haven't read them already, because I'm quickly learning that a lot of the books on my bookshelf I have glanced through, quickly referenced. Maybe I've, kept them on the shelf because I thought at some future date I would have a use for them. But I'm quickly realizing a lot of the books on my bookshelf I haven't actually given a full read of. So it's leading to an issue of I have to read them in order to review them. And I need to make sure that I'm picking books that I've already read or at least have some familiarity with or can read quickly so that I can talk about them in a meaningful way. So that's basically where we're at with the episodes. Again, we just had our I don't know why I'm using the royal we there. Just launched on Anchor.fm. So now all of the edited podcasts will have at least an advertisement on the Anchor.fm versions, and so they're going out to Apple and to Google and I think a couple other podcast apps. I don't use a whole lot of different podcast apps. I'm going to still try and keep uploading to SoundCloud, at least until I run out of all of my free minutes, which probably is happening very soon. So I'm on the fence whether or not I want to subscribe to SoundCloud to keep uploading episodes there. I might end up just purging all the episodes on SoundCloud so that I can make more room for the soundtracks that I'm working on for the two educational video games, The Ethnographer and Bee Horizon, because I'm slowly working through the songs I composed for those soundtracks, and I have to obviously record them and all that fun stuff and edit them and get them ready. So I'd probably prefer to put those on SoundCloud rather than have them on there in addition to the podcast and just let the podcast exist elsewhere. So that's the other news. That's basically it for this week, at least in terms of news. This semester is really kicking my butt because we don't get a spring break. We're just flying through it. I've got a class that I'm going to be taking in 3 weeks. So not only am I teaching 5 classes right now, but in about 3 weeks I'm going to be taking another class on top of that because I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. I don't know. It's a class in coding too, so yeah, I get to add to my workload. Yay. But that's not the whole point of the getting ready with the news and whatnot. This week's episode I'm really excited about, so let's just go ahead and get started with it. We're going to, if I can drag it over here, get our script up here so that we're ready to go, and then we're going to launch into it. All right. Compose yourself. We're good. Hello, and welcome to From the Archives, a short podcast where I talk about a book from my library and whether you should or shouldn't read it. I'm Eric, a professor of anthropology at Cuyahoga Community College, and welcome to my library. The books in my library are sometimes old, sometimes rare, sometimes normal, but always interesting. This podcast is recorded live on Twitch at Anthropology Archives every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's Anthropology Archives, all one word, lowercase. During live recordings, I promise to read all questions and comments and other people's book reviews in a different accent to make it sound like other people are talking and not just my own voice. Don't worry, if you've missed the live stream, you can listen to old episodes on SoundCloud or on Anchor.fm, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch old episodes if you'd like to see what these books look like on my YouTube channel of the same name, Anthropology Archives. Every episode I ask myself the following questions. Who wrote it? what's it about, what are other people saying about it, should you read it, and whether I should can it or keep it. That means, am I going to throw this book away, donate it, or keep it on the bookshelf? So with that being said, let's pull a book from the shelf. And I don't actually need to walk over to the bookshelf because today's episode is a little different than other episodes. You can't see it if you're listening, but I have a giant tower of books. I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different books that I'm going to be talking about today. So eventually, I'm going to have to do some episodes where I do sets of books, and this is one of those episodes, and it's about dictionaries. So I have lots of dictionaries on my bookshelf, and I also have lots of editions of like Intro to Archaeology textbooks. Go figure, an archaeology professor would have those. Intro to Anthropology, Cultural Anthropology textbooks, map books, and atlases. So we'll probably treat all of those different kinds and sets of books as a set. And so today, oh boy, I slapped the book, the tower of books, and my whole desk shook. But today we're talking about dictionaries. So you're probably asking yourself two main questions when you hear the idea, oh, this is an episode about dictionaries. What could you possibly review about dictionaries? So the first thing is, did you sit down and read all of these cover to cover? And why would dictionaries be worthy of reviewing and discussing? So obviously, I did not sit down and read these cover to cover. That's not really why I want to talk about all these dictionaries and what makes them fun and interesting, and why I'm really excited to talk about today's lesson. Or not lesson, oh my goodness. I just put on my teacher cap there. No, the reason I want to talk about the dictionaries is because some fun things you can see and read about in these dictionaries if you have more than one. I'm not saying that one dictionary on its own isn't useful. Probably not so much in this day and age with the internet, but if you have dictionaries that are old, like even dictionaries that, I mean, the newest one I have on this tower of dictionaries is the Merriam-Webster's Medical Dictionary. Oh yeah, listen to that ASMR sound. And this one is from 2007. My oldest dictionary is a reprint of the Devil's Dictionary by Ambrose Bierce from the 1860s, I think is when he first published it. So I've got like 150-ish years of dictionary definitions in between. So I guess before I really start launching into discussing why I have dictionaries, I might as well go through all of the ones that I pulled out. I did not realize before I started recording this episode or getting prepped for it, I did not realize I had this many dictionaries. I knew I had like 3 or 4 because they sit on my bookshelf, like, you know, my right hand can immediately go to the dictionary if I need to use it. And I don't really use it that often because obviously I have the internet. But we'll get into all the kinds of fun things you can do with the dictionary. So the oldest one I have, like I said, is the Devil's Dictionary. And I stacked them. I stacked them in chronological order. So now I have to dig it out. Ambrose Bierce, the Devil's Dictionary. I believe this is published in the originally published, I should say, because obviously I don't have an original copy. Originally published in, oh gosh, I can't find it, but, originally published in 1911. I thought I was much older than that. Oops, my bad. So I guess it was published in 1911. He was born in the 1840s, so 1911 being one of the oldest ones. I guess that would make my next oldest, or the oldest book, a book called Slang and its Analogues by Farmer and Henley. It was originally published in 1905, and then somehow I think I pilfered this from like some free book section somewhere where they're about to toss it. This was a New York Times reprint in the 70s of the 1905 edition, so it's basically a slang dictionary from the turn of the 20th century, so around the same time as Ambrose Bierce. And then we have, it's like playing a game of Jenga as I rotate these things. Oh, I can't read this one. It's a Webster's Dictionary of Synonyms from 1942, and that one I got from my wife Kristen's grandfather when he passed. That was in his library when he passed, and we somehow acquired it. There's also a fun leaf that he put in there too, but I decided to keep the leaf in. And then he also had a thesaurus of the English language in dictionary form. This one's from the 30s, reprinted in 1940. And then this really beat up one here that's got tape on it and like the cover's falling off. I actually have 2 that are like that. And this is a father-daughter set. This older one is from the 40s, and that's from my grandfather when he went off to college in like the 1950s. He brought his 1947 dictionary with him. And then in between all of that, we've got a Macedonian grammar book with a dictionary in the back. I think I got that from the University of Akron Library, when they were going to toss it. So I guess I have a Macedonian dictionary. I didn't even realize it. I started looking around on the bookshelf at things that might be other dictionaries, and then I stumbled across this one. So I'm discovering stuff even in my own library. I've also got a dictionary from 1965, dictionary from 1980. That was my mom's when she was in grad school. You can see it was well loved. The spine cover is coming off. A thesaurus, also from 1980. And then I've got a Japanese, Arabic, and Russian foreign language dictionary. And then at the top is the medical dictionary. Whew. So a lot of dictionaries to go through, and a lot of time in this episode just soaked up by describing all of the different books in this set. So one of the fun things I decided to do with this, and to illustrate why looking through old dictionaries is fun, is I decided to take a random word and look at its change through time. And this just sort of became a meandering, I explored words around it just to see what was there. And it's really fun to look at some old dictionaries because you can watch how the definitions change through time and when they start to change. But then you can also see where words appear in the dictionary. So like new words that are being added, and then words that are falling out of the dictionary because nobody uses them anymore. And there's going to be a couple examples that I have, or at least one example that stood out to me that I just stumbled across in this 1980 dictionary. That's kind of fun. So I tried to make this as like systematic as possible. So what I did is I used random.org's random number generator, and then using the 1942 dictionary, I just picked a random number between 1 and I think it's 186. That's how many pages are in here. And it generated 110. I flipped 110, and then I picked a word on that page. That word was beautiful. So I then had to find beautiful in the Devil's Dictionary. My biggest concern with this was that not all of these dictionaries are necessarily going to have all the same information. Like one of them is a pocket dictionary, so obviously it's not going to be as extensive as some of these other thick boys up here. Like this 1980 dictionary is, like at least 2-3 inches thick. It's big. And then the Devil's Dictionary was a satirical dictionary written in the early 20th century. So obviously they're not going to have every word in the dictionary of all of these different sets. But I thought beautiful was a good enough word that it's probably going to be in all of these dictionaries, including the foreign language ones. But it's really interesting going through all of them. So let's start off with Ambrose Bierce, his Devil's Dictionary. And you might start to notice some patterns in the word beautiful or beauty. I use them interchangeably because some of the dictionaries didn't have beautiful, but they had beauty, and they're essentially the same kind of concept and word. So in the Devil's Dictionary, beauty is a noun, and it's defined as the power by which a woman charms a lover and terrifies a husband. So already in this like sort of facetious, mocking tone, Ambrose Bierce is establishing gender dynamics with beauty. And that's something I noticed throughout all of these definitions, was how beautiful and beauty was directly tied with femaleness. And that's something that, honestly, before I started doing this, I hadn't really, I wasn't sitting there thinking about the word beautiful, like pondering its etymology or how it's used. I've used beautiful all the time to describe things. But I guess I never really sat down to think about how beautiful, at least in American English, is oftentimes tied to gender-specific forms of beauty. Like to call a man beautiful is not the same as calling a man handsome, which is something that I found interesting comparing it to the Russian, Japanese, and Arabic dictionaries. But we'll get there. We're working our way forwards through time. So, picking all of these guys up. Oh my gosh, my coffee is also on this desk, so I just have to be very careful not to spill anything. So if we go to roughly the same time in the Slang Dictionary, which the Slang Dictionary has this fun cover from the 1970 edition. It's a guy talking and then another guy in like a waistcoat. He looks like he's from the early 1800s or whatever, like doing a mega face palm and almost keeling over in his chair is what the front cover is. But the word beauty, at least according to the 1905 Slang Dictionary that I've got here, and this thing is quite in depth. They try to do lexicography. So dictionaries are basically like early form linguistics. So if you're really interested in studying language and linguistics, this is sort of like the first step towards becoming a linguist. And a lot of early linguistics was basically just trying to get a grasp on what are all the words that we could use. Let's try and organize grammar, just trying to get a handle on how language works and its structure and all that kind of stuff. So some really interesting stuff can be found in dictionaries. But beauty, oh, I just had it in here. Beaker, that doesn't help me. Bear, beastly, oh, sorry. I'm on the wrong page, that's why. Beauty. American cadet is what they define it as. A term applied on the rule of contrary to the plainest or ugliest cadet in the class at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Also see snooker and babe. So in 1905, it was a slang term mocking a male cadet. So again, you see that gender dynamic of, boy, isn't he a beauty, meaning the opposite, so he's ugly, but also implying some sort of gender reinforcement there. By saying he's a beauty, he's not good looking as a man should be or expected to be. So you're encoding a lot of cultural information by communicating to someone that they're a beauty. So interesting that in those two definitions from the early 20th century, we have that really strong gender dynamic. And then if we fast forward, and I don't think I'm going to really necessarily distinguish between the 1942, 1930s, 1947. I mean, those are all like the same era. So I'm just going to give you the one from 1942, because this one, interestingly enough, Dictionary of Synonyms, this one is actually in really good condition compared to my other dictionaries, probably because I don't know, my wife's grandfather, I never met him. He died before I ever met him. But knowing my grandfather, he had that dictionary. He used it up until the day he died. And so, of course, like, he's flipping through that thing. Pages are getting torn. The cover's starting to tear off. He's using that thing constantly. Whereas I have no idea the use life of this dictionary. Clearly wasn't used as much or beat up as much. But for beautiful, I mean, my gosh, we have a page and a half of text. It literally is like 3/4 of one page just talking about beautiful. And they have all these synonyms for it, like lovely, handsome, pretty, bonny, comely. That was one that I found odd. It was in all of the dictionaries, comely. Like, I have never in modern English heard someone use the term comely to describe someone and not end up having it turn into some sexual innuendo. So comely, definitely out. I mean, nobody's using that word to describe someone as beautiful. Beauteous, fair. But what's interesting is they go at length in here to describe a beautiful woman. And I saw this in the 1940s edition. They specifically describe, like, Helen of Troy, the woman that set sail 1,000 ships or something like that. And then they describe that in contrast to handsome, specifically being cold and without emotion. And so if you're describing someone as beautiful, then you're describing them with, like, emotion and passion, whereas handsome means they meet all of the objective criteria of beautiful without any of the passion behind it. And so what they're not really communicating in any of these is that clearly there's a gendered component. They're just not addressing it. And I think that's just true of most of these dictionaries is, you know, looking at other similar words, I started to get surprised about how sexuality and gender is portrayed in these dictionaries and how it's basically like just taken for fact and not really criticized. But I guess that's maybe the anthropologist in me saying, like, hey, you know, you could just point out that beautiful is code for female and handsome is code for male. So calling someone beautiful who identifies as male is an insult, and calling someone handsome who identifies as female is considered an insult as well, or not as nice. But they don't really get into that with these definitions. Like they say I'm handsome. You're lovely, Bella. She drank in his homage. Like they're quoting something here that says, like, to be called handsome as a woman is unkind. And I guess we could, like, fast forward here. I mean, you get the same thing with, you know, the little 1965 pocket dictionary. Nothing to write home about this Macedonian dictionary, because what's frustrating about this Macedonian Grammar of the Macedonian Literary Language by Horace Lunt from 1952 is that they provide you a Macedonian dictionary or Macedonian to English, but they do not provide you English to Macedonian. So I had the darndest time trying to figure out where beautiful was, and it is ubav, beautiful, pretty, handsome, fine. And then apparently you can add an ina, so a modifier to make it beauty, like as in a noun. And that kind of ties into the Russian dictionary. I had the little pocket Russian dictionary. I studied Russian in high school and college, which is why I have this little Russian dictionary. And what's interesting, at least from my understanding of Slavic languages, flipping to the word for beautiful, krasavets, or krasavca, krasivaya, or krasivi, is that beautiful and handsome, it means the same thing. So they don't have that sort of gendered component with the word beautiful in Russian. It's, you can call a man or a woman krasivi or krasivaya. You'd modify it to connote gender or indicate gender at the end because that's how Russian works. But it's interesting that they don't have that gendered component, but in English we do. We have handsome and beautiful. You don't use them the same. They're kind of gender coded, which I guess I hadn't really thought about too much until I started doing this little random assignment, or not random assignment, but this little random activity looking at that words change through time. And that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of like looking at words around the word beautiful in each of these dictionaries. And that's how I stumbled across this odd word in the 1980 edition. And there's only 2 other dictionaries I have that use this word. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about it. Well, I guess I should back up before I talk about that word. I should talk about what beautiful looks like in my Japanese and Arabic dictionaries. And it's interesting that they also don't have the same kind of concept of beautiful or beauty that's gendered. At least in Japanese, the first one, I just pulled the first word in Japanese for beautiful. Or at least basically what I did is I looked it up in the English to Japanese, and then I went to the Japanese section to see how they translated it back from Japanese into English. And so that word, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Well, I guess I could. Kirei which is an adjective for clean, comma, beautiful. So clean or beautiful. So obviously that's a very different kind of understanding of beautiful than, say, the English definition. And then in Arabic, we could take it a whole other step there. They have beautiful of people, beautiful of places, and beautiful of things. So they're distinguishing people, places, and things, and how you would identify beauty, and not necessarily a gendered component there as well. So you can have a beautiful person, but there's not necessarily a beautiful woman versus a beautiful man. Whereas in English, beautiful is specifically, at least looking through the history of this, I mean, going back to Ambrose Bierce here, specifically gendered towards femaleness. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Something I guess I hadn't really thought about until I just did this little activity where I picked a random word and looked at its change through time. Now, if you don't have all these dictionaries, it might not be as fun. But if you have a dictionary that's like 10 or more years old, it's probably going to have some really fun or interesting different definitions than what we know of them today. Like the amount of language change that's happened in the last 10 years is bonkers. I mean, bonkers is a great example. That's probably not a word people were using more than 20 years ago. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But segueing here, I started looking around at other words that were neighboring the word beauty, because I was just kind of curious, like looking around in the dictionary to see how they're all different. Some of these dictionaries like have pictures and images in them, like of, I flipped through and this one has like the Beaufort scale. I had no idea what that was. One of them had a picture of a chess set, which I flipped through as well. But this one I found interesting. This is a 1980 Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary, and they had this word in here, and I just had to note it. I had to be like, what the heck is this? Bino. Beano. And it's not to be confused with that proprietary product, Bino, that like makes you not gassy or whatever. Their definition is it's a noun, plural, or you could pluralize it as binos, and it's an alternative for the term bingo. But what's really interesting is I couldn't find bingo in the dictionary. This same dictionary says Bino is an alternative to bingo, and then I looked for bingo, and it didn't exist. And then that got me wondering, I have never heard of Bino as an alternative to bingo. I'm familiar with bingo, like bingo, you got it. That's, hitting the nail on the head. And so I went down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out, does any other dictionary have Bino? The 1965 edition didn't have it. Ambrose Bierce, at least I couldn't tell, had the word Bino. He didn't really have a whole lot of words anyway. And the only other place I found Bino was the 1905 Slang Dictionary. And they've got a bajillion different things for bean, beaner, bean feast, bean belly, bean feaster, and then here's Bino, the same as a bean feast, or someone who is a bean feaster. Basically, it's an annual feast given by employers to their work people. The derivation is uncertain, and at present there is little evidence to go upon. Some have, I should have realized all this time. I should be reading these definitions in an accent. And since most of the ones about bean have to do with Boston, I'm getting a strong sense that I'm going to take a stab at reading some of these in a Boston accent. So forgive me, those of you who are from Boston. I'm going to make an attempt at it because all of these bean definitions directly relate to baked beans in Boston because Boston was known for their baked beans. An annual feast given by employers to their work people. The derivation is uncertain, and at present there is little evidence to go upon. Some have suggested its origin and the prominence of the bean goose or even beans at these spreads. Others refer it to the French bien, good, a good feast. Oh my gosh, I am going all over the place with this accent because in my head I was going for JFK, and then it just bounced around. It's not going great. I'll be honest, it's not going great. By the by, tailors call all good feeds bean feasts. So basically, it sounds like a bean feast is just a big celebration. So Bino, at least in 1905, completely different from Bino, meaning bingo, in 1980. And so I couldn't find it afterwards either in any dictionaries that I had afterwards, although I don't really have that many post 1980 now that I realize it. And then obviously in the medical dictionary, like this one is very different than all the other ones because it's medical terminology. But it was so humorous to me that the medical dictionary has all these technical jargony words like, you have Behçet syndrome, if you want to know what that is, or BCG vaccine. But they also have a definition for the word bed. A piece of furniture on or in which one may lie asleep. See hospital bed. So it's literally, they have a definition for bed. Like, of all the things to put into a medical dictionary where you might need to know, like, what is Cushing's disease or what is lupus and all that kind of stuff, I don't know what a bed is. It seems sort of, why take up space with that word, right? Why? So funny things like that. And I guess this also made me bounce around and look at how the word bisexual is defined. And what struck me the most is that bisexual in all of these editions, I'm pointing as if you can see all of them, all of these different editions, is bisexual was the same. And so this really intrigued me that, the way we talk about LGBTQ plus in our discourse is still very young and in its infancy, because even in a 2007 edition of a medical dictionary, the first thing they list bisexual as is possessing characters of both sexes. And then they have the gall to use the word hermaphroditic, which, is definitely not a term you want to be using in front of people that may be what we would probably more likely call intersex these days, especially with the Intersex Society of North America. I believe it's the Intersex Society, National Intersex Association of America, I think maybe is what it is. I'm blanking on exactly what it is. But we'd probably more accurately call people with both genitalia or both gonads as intersex, more so than bisexual. And it's not until the second definition of a 2007 book that bisexual is defined as relating to or characterized by a tendency to direct sexual desire toward individuals of both sexes. So it's just interesting how that definition changed only in the 2007 edition. The only difference between this 2007 dictionary and the 1942 book is the addition of bisexual, meaning you like guys and girls. It does not appear in the 1942 edition, and the Otherwise, they're identical. And I thought that was really fascinating when looking through all of these dictionaries. And you could do the same kind of thing with all sorts of different words. And I'm tempted to almost kind of make this a regular segment if it's interesting enough, trying to come up with other words, maybe randomly pick out a word, maybe like a little segment every now and then that I tack on to future episodes instead of doing a whole episode just about dictionaries. But yeah, if you've never kind of played around with dictionaries, explored, what's inside of a dictionary, I highly recommend you try this and experiment with it just to get a familiarity with how words and languages change. I mean, shoot, I didn't know about Bino or the complexities of beautiful until I started looking through all these dictionaries. You might find a word, you could just be flipping through, pick a word out, and then you can even look up online the Webster's Dictionary from I think the 1830s, 1860s and 1870s, and even the 1890s. Those are all online, so you can actually look up the 19th century Webster's dictionaries to see what their definitions were, and then you can actually trace like 200 years of how these words have changed through time. So beautiful might have even been completely different definitions back in the 1830s. You might want to try that out. So I also ended up thinking maybe people actually review these dictionaries. So I ended up looking up on Goodreads to see if any of these dictionaries had reviews, because I thought, I can't be the only one to think to review these dictionaries. And wouldn't you know it, I found reviews for the Slang and its analogs by Farmer and Henley, and I found a few reviews for the Medical Dictionary from 2007, which has been updated in 2020. I don't have the 2020 edition, I just have the 2007 edition. So this person's review, this is by Steven, rated at 5 out of 5 stars. Steven is from Boston, so of course he's going to talk in a Boston accent. Originally published in 7 volumes between 1890 and 1904, the edition I have includes all 7 volumes in one book. I love to read dictionaries and have spent many hours in this one, which is a compendium of not just slang, but contemporary usage dating from the 1500s until its publication. Mostly English usage, but also a lot of early Americanisms, actually a fun and hilarious read. So that's Steven's review from October of 2015, 5 out of 5 stars. Yeah, I'd probably give this one a good read as well, or a good high rating. I wouldn't necessarily say that you need to get any of these in particular. I'd definitely look into getting the Slang Dictionary because it's kind of interesting. Especially since 1904 is far enough removed in the past that there's going to be so many different words that just don't exist anymore in the English language. And then for the Medical Dictionary, not as interesting. Almost everyone's reviews are just basically like, oh, I bought this for my niece who's going into med school, or oh, I bought this for so-and-so who's going to work in medicine or has to work with doctors a lot. And it works great. The only complaint people had was that the print is really small. I mean, it's probably 8 or 9 font or print size. I should know this better because I also have a giant book on typography, so I should know that. So nothing really exciting or interesting to note about these reviews of it, but that there are reviews of these dictionaries. So I was not crazy for thinking that there are reviews for dictionaries. Now, am I going to can or keep any of these? I'm probably going to can the Merriam-Webster Thesaurus from 1980. It's pretty chewed up. I don't think anyone would want it. Certainly, maybe if there is someone out there who wants it, I'll pass it along. But, this thesaurus didn't add anything that it didn't already get from the dictionaries that I already have. And, it's pretty beat up. So I'm probably going to can one book. So, yay, I canned one, but I kept 12 other dictionaries. Because I think I really will do this as like a future segment of talking about dictionaries and doing like maybe a word of the month and looking at its differences through all these different dictionaries. We'll see. I don't know if I'll incorporate that or not. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. On next week's episode, we're going to be talking about the book The Earliest Americans by... hold on. Bear with me. The Earliest Americans by William Scheel, or Skeel, published in 1963. And it is circulated by the World Publishing Company, Cleveland and New York. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week, is The Earliest Americans. It's a pretty thin book, educational book. We'll talk more about it next week, I guess. And until then, never stop reading.